were some questions that got submitted. So maybe you want to start. Have you got those, Jen? You want to start with one of those? We'll fire them.
Yeah, no problem, Stuart. So one of the questions that I've got down is about the safety of the vaccine. So some people have got some concerns about how quickly, it looks to us on the outside as though things have gone quite quickly with the development. And it's just really around how safe the vaccines are.
That's a good question. Well, yeah, I mean, whenever a vaccine or any medicine gets licensed, the regulators have to be sure that it is safe. And for all of the vaccines that have been licensed, I think there's just 3 now. No, there's a 4th one. I think that's been licensed in Canada. They certainly passed those checks. People on the Zoom call may have been aware of this blood clots thing that has come up in Europe. I mean, that is something in the UK that has been, well, in the UK, they've been looking at any adverse effects. And the UK is probably vaccinated, well, certainly more than anyone else in Europe. Like there's about 25 million vaccinations being done, and we've not seen that. And I think the thing is, whenever you have a vaccine, anything can happen at any time. Like I could drop dead of a heart attack in 5 minutes, and I had my 2nd dose of my vaccine the other day. That doesn't mean that the vaccine caused me to drop dead of a heart attack. It can be a coincidence. And when I look at the numbers of the blood clots and stuff, I think my feeling is that is just a coincidence. And I don't think there's any cause-effect relationship with the vaccine. Obviously, some of the health authorities in Europe are looking at this now, but I mean, that's my belief basically. And if we look at the benefits in the UK, the program has had is absolutely enormous. Like the numbers of hospital admissions, ICU admissions, and deaths have just absolutely plummeted. So I think that the side effects seem pretty minor and the benefits seem pretty major. So it's a bit of a no-brainer. Now, I'd be happy to take questions from anyone on the call, if there are any. Or yes, Alan.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I was fortunate in having my 2nd jab last Friday. It was brought forward. They got some extra vaccines in at the doctor's surgery, so they got rid of them, and I was happy to accommodate. I'm looking at my protection. As you may remember, some time ago, in article in Paget, so I mentioned about my dancing and all the rest of it, which I haven't been able to do for 12 months now. Now, I've now been vaccinated, so in 3 weeks' time, I should have good immunity. So how about mixing with other people, maybe who've also had the vaccination and the immunity? Because I want to get my life back.
Quite right. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, actually, data from Scotland, they did a nationwide study from Scotland looking at people who even had 1 dose of the vaccine, and the protection was very considerable. I mean, it was nearly 90%, that's even with 1 dose. And with 2 doses, it's probably going to be more. Now, it might not be 100%, but it looks very close to 100% for getting ill, basically, okay? Yep. So you might not completely be prevented of getting it, but it looks like even if you do get it, in the small proportion that do, it's a very mild illness, basically. So and you'll be aware, Alan, that of course the government is keen not to kind of drop the social distancing measures quite yet. So I think we've got to be careful about that at the moment. But my belief is that as more experience is gained and as the things relax, I think we will realise that the efficacy is very considerable, and maybe you will be able to get back to dancing again.
I know being selfish in a way, but I know 1 or 2 dance places are now saying that they're going to open up, and one's got a party on the Saturday after the 21st of June. And I'm a little bit twitchy because even normally it's quite crowded, even around the outside of the tables, and the COVID is still going to be around. Yeah. We haven't got rid of it, and the susceptibility of me picking it up or passing it on to somebody else. It's just, I get twitchy.
I think if you're vaccinated, you're unlikely to pass it on, because to pass it on, you've got to be infected and making virus. So I think that's unlikely. I mean, personally, I would go with it because I missed my 65th birthday last year, and I booked a hotel in the end of May, and I can tell you, I'm going to be, if allowed, I'm going to be going to that hotel and celebrating.
Yeah. Well, I've got my 80th coming up this summer, so I've got another celebration to consider. I
mean, what you got to realize is that the virus is probably not going to be absolutely eliminated for years. And as the schools, as people go back to schools, and obviously school children aren't vaccinated and younger people haven't been yet. I mean, you know, there is a possibility of having cases, but school children and younger people have a very mild illness indeed and are unlikely to get unwell. In fact, most younger people don't even know they've had it, actually, whereas it's older guys like you and me that are more at risk. So I think that's the important thing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the comments. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Alan. Any other questions? Any others, Jen, from your list?
Yeah, so one of the questions I've got, Stuart, is a lot of people have noted that they've had kind of mild side effects after having the vaccine. Is that something that most people should expect? Is that a common side effect to have, and what kinds of things might people be watching out for?
Thank you. Yeah, it's kind of, yeah, it's not that common. I think it's about 25% have a kind of mild flu-like illness, maybe a bit of pain in the arm, maybe some swollen glands, but it's mild and it seems to be self-limiting. It's in the trials where they vaccinated a range of ages of people, the side effects were more common in younger people. So the younger you were, the more marked was the side effect. I think that's because in younger people your immune system is more active than if you're older, so your immune system isn't so good when you're older, and that's maybe why when you're older, you know, that's why it correlates with having a bad outcome. But older people respond to the vaccine seemingly pretty well, and they get good protection, and they may have slightly less in the way of side effects. But I think it's fair to say I'm not convinced there are any serious side effects with the vaccine, or if there are, they're extremely rare. So that's my intel on that. Okay, anyone else? Carol?
Okay, I just got my second vaccination on Saturday. I had no side effects at all. My husband, however, I thought I would just pass this on. Last night he spent the night sweating and shaking.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's fine this morning, other than being tired from not sleeping very well last night. I guess my question would be, we hear so much about all these variants, I had Moderna is what I had for vaccination.
Okay. That's like Dolly Parton, by the way, Carol. You're in good company. Genuinely, did you not see Dolly Parton's bit on YouTube? Oh, you should watch that. You know how she has that song, Jolene, Jolene? She did a wee tune called Vaccine, Vaccine. It was absolutely brilliant. I killed myself. Sorry, let me get back to, yeah, carry on. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I guess I was just curious as to, do you think this means we're going to have to get a vaccination every year with all the upgrade variants and that type of thing? And how much protection do we have now going forward against those variants?
Yeah, I think that this was a bit of an unknown, actually. But all of the vaccines, they're all based on a similar idea. So what they do is they took the sequence of the original coronavirus from Wuhan, like the very original one, like way back. And they've introduced that, essentially a bit of it into the vaccine. That was that original version of it, as it were. And the way it happens with these viruses, the same with all viruses, they just change as time goes on and they accumulate mutations. And they talk about, it's quite interesting because they talk about, I don't know, the Kent variant or the Brazilian variant. In fact, these variants are arising spontaneously everywhere because they just do. So it's not as though they have to start somewhere and then get transported. Anyway, all the evidence is, and it came from one of the more recent vaccines where they actually had sequence data on people that got infected, and all the evidence is you get pretty good protection against all of the variants. Okay, so even though there's a slight variation, you're probably getting pretty good protection about it. In fact, almost certainly getting pretty good protection. And the reason is to do with your immune system. So what happens with your immune system is it will detect the virus, and they've talked about these spike protein variants, but your immune system detects other parts of the virus too, and it processes little bits of the virus and presents little bits of peptide from the virus to your T cells, like your immune cells, and that generates a response. So I think it's coming apparent that the immune response to the virus is kind of more wide-ranging than just these individual mutations. Now, will we need a vaccine every year? Who knows? We don't really know that. They are talking about that. They're talking about that here in the UK. I think it's difficult to tell, actually. I mean, it could be we might, but we'll have to do research, actually. We'll have to do research. There have been some research studies looking at people. It was mainly healthcare workers who got actually coronavirus early during the pandemic, and there was a study published in one of the journals, and the risk of them getting it again within the next like 9 months or a year was very, very low indeed. So they had immunity. And I think what we're going to see over the next year is more studies like that are going to tell us, well, if you've had it or if you've been vaccinated, are you having a chance of getting it? So we won't know, actually. We won't know. I think it's going to be well into the end of this year before we know. But if you do need a booster, I don't think it's a big deal, basically. I don't think it's a big deal. I would have one, that's for sure.
Me too. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions, anyone? Oh, Jamie.
Hi, yeah. Actually going on the whole, so if you've had the coronavirus, they're still suggesting the vaccine as well. Is there a particular reason that they're doing it that way, or
Well,
I mean,
yeah, I can answer the logic of that. So if you've had coronavirus, you may well have your own immunity, okay?
right.
But when they were doing the trials of all of the vaccines, they found out almost like in retrospect that then when they vaccinated people, it turned out that about 10% of people had already had coronavirus. Now, they didn't know that at the time because these people had it and they were probably didn't have any symptoms or had very mild symptoms. They didn't realize they'd had it. But so what they found was, although the 10% of people had it, it wasn't as though they had worse in the way of reactions, and they got an equal amount of protection. So that was the reason for the authorities saying, look, even if you've had it, you can still get it, and the vaccine, sorry. And so I would kind of probably think of it as a booster. Like if you thought you'd had it, you're getting an immunity booster, and so that's why they haven't made a bar to if you've had it before. I think the other reason, Jamie, is a logistical reason. Like I've said, in the UK, they've immunized 25 million people. Now, if they had to do antibody tests on everyone before they got a vaccine, before they offered the vaccine, that is just a massive logistical exercise. So I think what they thought is, right, we're just going to give it anyway. It's not going to do any harm probably, and it's much more likely to do good. So I think that's where that came from.
That makes sense.
I think it makes sense. I agree with you totally. Any other questions? Hope, what about you?
I haven't had it yet.
Oh.
And but here, I'm in South Carolina, and frankly, just this week did they allow my age to be able to go in and get it. So
oh, good.
I haven't had a chance to, but I've got a husband who is very leery of the mRNA of the Pfizer and Moderna.
Okay.
And so I've been kind of hanging back, in unity with him. But the Johnson & Johnson is just beginning to come open as of the last week or so. So yeah. I think he's turning a corner, and he's going to consider that. But just addressing the mRNA, I mean, he is highly leery of it, and he's reading everything he can get his hands on.
Well, I mean, I think I must admit, I as a scientist, I thought the RNA virus was really clever. Well, first of all, you've only got a little bit of RNA, and it only encodes for the spike protein. And it goes into the muscle, it makes that little protein. And then RNA has a very limited half-life in the body. It's degraded within a number of hours, basically, by the cells it's injected to. And so it's not going to hang around in the cells. It's going to make the protein. The protein is going to be expressed on the muscle, and then your immune cells are going to think that muscle is infected with coronavirus. That's how it works, okay? And it's going to mount an immune response to the not your own proteins, but the abnormal proteins. So that's how it works, and that's why it's effective. I am aware of the J&J vaccine. As you say, they've used a slightly different route to kind of do the same thing. There is now a massive safety record with these RNA vaccines. I mean, I wouldn't have said there's all that much to worry about, or I wouldn't have said there's anything to worry about, but if your husband wants to wait for, what age is your husband?
He's just turned 70.
He'd be going for a vaccination ASAP. But if he wants to wait for the J&J one, then so be it. I mean, the AstraZeneca one is not RNA, it's DNA. But actually, it gets converted into RNA in the cell, because that's the only way you can make the protein. But there are the vaccine. Yeah, I think it is the J&J one. It's actually the viral protein that's on. So, well, if you look at the trials, the results were all very similar safety-wise. So I don't see a big difference.
Okay.
Okay. Any other things, Jen, that's not been covered?
I've just got one, Stuart. Does Paget's disease or the treatment for Paget's affect the vaccine in any way? Should people with Paget's disease, be aware of anything any different from anybody else?
Not so far as we know. I think it would not impair the immunity. Obviously, the vaccines weren't studied specifically in people with Paget's disease, but they were studied in people with a whole variety of conditions, diabetes and some people with heart disease and asthma and all that kind of stuff. So basically, the companies and the regulators looked very carefully if there were any disease subgroups that seemed to get more in the way of side effects. There weren't. An issue, not an issue, but a problem, if you like, with the trials is they didn't study anyone that had what's called immunosuppression. Okay, so that's like if you take people with rheumatoid arthritis or inflammatory diseases, no people with those diseases were included in the trials. But of course, now loads of people with those conditions have been vaccinated, certainly in the UK, and it looks like they're being protected just as much as anyone else. So obviously that's really reassuring. In fact, I heard about a study that the Medical Research Council were going to fund in the UK, looking at the vaccine response in people with inflammatory diseases, but they were too slow off the mark, because by the time they got their act together, everyone with the disease had been vaccinated already. so it's not much of, because I mean, I'm a rheumatologist as well as doing bone disease. I treat people with rheumatoid arthritis and all that kind of stuff. And all of our patients have been vaccinated, and they've all done pretty well with it. And I can't think of a single patient I know of who's been vaccinated who's actually developed coronavirus, which is fantastic, because we were worried about them, getting that because of their immunosuppression.
Great, thank you.
Okay, ladies and gents, any other question? Have I answered your question? Alan?
I come back. Sorry, I've got my hand raised, so I'll drop that down now. You talked about a minute ago about the revaccination. Now, at the moment, we get the flu jab every so often, like annually, but which is quite an effort to get sorted out. And I don't know how many people are in that catchment, but if it was the COVID, it'd be the whole population.
Yeah, I mean,
the logistics of getting that together, they're done well at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? My gut feeling is it might be a bit like flu. It might be older people, it might be over 65 or over 60. That's my gut feeling, but who knows? The flu is somewhat different because it really changes, or it can really change a lot in each year. And our evidence is that the coronavirus is not changing suddenly a lot, you know. There's these little gradual changes that are building up with time. And of course, they're still in the UK, they're still doing a lot of sequencing. So who knows, but that's my feeling is what will happen. And as I said earlier, I think we'll know a lot more, later in the spring, summer, what the policy is.
I can see them doing a double top up, the flu and the COVID,
Oh my God.
Mix the two together and give one shot,
Yeah, I don't know if they'll do that, but I can imagine that we'll still be getting, us older lot, we'll still be getting flu vaccines each year, and maybe corona vaccines each year.
Oh, as a separate issue. Okay, didn't know they might combine the two together, or.
Yeah, I think there would be a wariness about that. Well, it'd have to be studied. As you probably know, with other vaccines, yeah, they can do that, like MMR, that's 3 vaccines. And if they find it's possible to do that, yeah, of course it could be. But then you have to do trials of mixing the two and make sure they don't interfere with each other.
Okay.
Sue, you had a question. Or did you have a question, Sue? No, you didn't have a question.
Stuart, there was just one other thing I was going to ask, if that's okay. If you have been vaccinated, can you still then carry the virus and pass it on to others? I know at first there was talk about that. Has any new information come out about whether you still carry it and pass it on to others that haven't been vaccinated?
There isn't any specific information, but I think it's just very unlikely, because, I mean, obviously you can have the virus like on things you touch, okay, like cups or whatever, or door handles. Although apparently that is not a common way of the disease transmitting, they've found now. So, but if you are vaccinated, the virus would not be able to replicate in your body, basically. And so I think it's almost certain you wouldn't be able to pass it on. Maybe not absolutely impossible, but extremely, extremely unlikely. Extremely unlikely. That's my belief. And again, those are things that are being looked at, as in great detail.
Yeah.
And we will find out, but I think it's unlikely you would be able to pass it on. I mean, as some of you know, I'm working in the hospital. I was working in the hospital today, and we still have coronavirus patients in our wards, although the numbers are going down a lot. And I've been in these areas. I'm older. I've had my vaccinations and I haven't got it. I'll tell you, 6 months ago, I bet you I would have come down with it. So I feel as though I feel confident, actually. I feel confident. I think the vaccine is giving you very good protection. Thank God. I'm looking forward to getting back to normal.